Hi, welcome to tonight's TikTok Q&A live. We've been announcing this for a while, and it's always a good opportunity for me not only to answer questions, but to give you a bit of an update what's happening with the campaign. Very, very exciting stuff. Poll numbers going up. A lot of people, I've been in a lot of places recently, was in Nevada, was in South Carolina, was in Michigan, New Hampshire. Everywhere we go, people are hearing the message, hearkening to the message, getting the message. The system is still doing its thing, including some really not cool stuff with the ballots in Florida and elsewhere, so we are trying to deal with that. But everything's revving up. People want to hear their options, and we are certainly an option. So I hope that you are thinking seriously about the campaign and about who you want to see. You know, there was the indictments of Hunter Biden that came out yesterday. Hunter Biden is not his father. We want to be very clear about that. But that's another drama that will complicate issues, distract if Joe Biden is the nominee. I think it weakens the argument that it has to be Joe. You might have seen the Republican debates the other night. You might have seen myself and Dean Phillips and Jen Kuger on the TYT after program after the debate. And so Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy and Chris Christie and Ron DeSantis, all of whom poll less. They poll lower among the Republicans than we poll among the Democrats. But of course, they're having debates. So we should have debates, but it's pretty obvious by now President Biden does not have any intention of debating us. But you are key to making sure that our message gets out anyway. So I hope that you will go to Marianne2024.com. I hope if you have not signed up to volunteer, I hope that you will. We need you to phone bank. For those of you who can make it, we really need you in New Hampshire. And send in what financial support you can if you want to see this continue to rise in the polls and ultimately show up with victory on primary election day, which begins in New Hampshire, January 23rd, then in South Carolina on the 3rd of February, Nevada on the 6th, and February 27th, I think, Michigan, and then on to Super Tuesday. So we have a lot of work to do, and I hope that you'll join us. But tonight is about answering your questions. So I'm going to just start. You've had a place where you could write in your questions over the last few days, and they've been given to me, so here they are. Number one, are you worried about splitting the Democratic vote? Well, okay, 8th grade civics, okay? This is a primary. When you're talking about people splitting the vote, like let's say what happens with if there's Ralph Nader or Joel Stein or someone running third party, can that split the vote? You can't split the vote here because I'm running as a Democrat. So no, this is democracy. And a big point here is that the Democratic Party is claiming to, we have to save democracy. Well, that's true, but you don't save democracy by suppressing democracy. And the visibilization, the erasure of our campaign, not only by the Democratic Party, but by their minions in the media. Not cool, not right, not right. And you see some of that even on the left as well, even in or not so much left as independent media who won't even have me on. Speak about me almost derisively, like based on bullshit. So, disappointing. But we can override all that, but need your help to do that. So in the meantime, no, I'm not spoiling anything. And you can't split the Democratic vote. It's called an election. And I'm running, Dean Phillips is running, Cenk is trying to get on more ballots. There is nothing in the Constitution which gives a special assignation to incumbency. So this idea that, no, Joe Biden, it has to be Joe Biden because we already have an incumbent. There's nothing in the Constitution, and there's nothing, they act like it's some long tradition. Well, I'm old enough to tell you, no, it's not. When I was a teenager, Lyndon Johnson was president, the incumbent, and Eugene McCarthy and then Bobby Kennedy Sr. ran against him. Nobody said, oh, how dare they, Johnson's an incumbent. That thought form wasn't even created yet. That was an artificially created narrative concocted by the DNC, particularly now to make you think, oh, you have to vote for Joe. Anything else is splitting the party. No, that's just not the case. We didn't think it was splitting the party. We thought it was democracy, and that's what this is. It's also important to realize that when Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy ran against Johnson, it was very, very important because they were running against the Vietnam War. And it's really important that we present equally fundamental alternatives to what the corporate Democrats are running on, because the idea here is that that's not enough to beat Donald Trump in 2024. Remember, Franklin Roosevelt said that we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivered on its promises. My contention is that fascists should never have gotten so close to the door. And the only reason they have is because democracy has not been delivering on its promises. What does that mean for democracy to deliver on its promises? It would mean that Americans have, as they do in every other advanced democracy, universal health care, tuition-free college, which they have in every other advanced democracy, and the entirety of my Bill of Rights, economic Bill of Rights. Tuition-free college and tech school, universal health care, cancellation of the college loan debt, subsidized childcare, which is a crisis for so many people, paid family leave, guaranteed housing, guaranteed affordable housing, which is such a crisis for so many people right now, guaranteed sick pay, and a guaranteed living wage. Remember, our living wage, our minimum wage, is still $7.25 an hour. You have 1/3 of Americans living on less than $15 an hour. Half of those people cannot find a place to live. And in every major city in the United States, the living wage is over $20 an hour. We also have half of our seniors living on $25,000 and less. So in order to win in 2024, we have to offer people a better life, a path to a better life. I agree with Roosevelt that public policy, the policies of the government, should be used to help people thrive. That's what should be the guiding principle of all public policy. Does it help people thrive? And right now, our governing principle is what creates short-term profits for huge corporate donors. And why is that? Because those corporate donors are what keep those people in office. So in issue after issue, you have legislators who are serving the short-term profit maximization goals of their donors more than they are serving the safety and health and well-being of the American people. In the Declaration of Independence, and that's our mission statement, and every generation has to take it in. I suggest that you read it, because reading the Declaration of Independence and asking, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my generation? Abraham Lincoln said that the Declaration of Independence is an eternal rebuke to forces of tyranny and oppression. And it says in there that governments are instituted to secure the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, that would be self-actualization, I think. How happy, Franklin Roosevelt said, a necessitous man is not a free man. How free are you when you can't live on just one job? How free are you? How free are you to pursue happiness when there are all these carcinogens in your food that they don't have in any other advanced democracy and so forth? Okay, let me go back to these questions. Number 2, will you be able to make it onto the Florida ballot? Well, the Florida Democratic Party has done some real shenanigans to make sure that Joe Biden is the only one on the ballot. But the Florida law says that if Joe Biden is the only one, or any one person is the only one, then there is no primary. So what, they're going to just deny Floridians a chance to even vote? So a lot's in process, lawyers, and we'll see what happens. Thoughts on animal agriculture and climate change? Any plans for food system reform? Absolutely. Let's start with food. There are carcinogens in our food that would not be allowed in any other advanced democracy. And now, what is that about? It has to do with the fact that there are chemicals and other toxins that you can put in food to increase their shelf life. But they're carcinogenic. And yet, everything has been so deregulated. You know, when I was growing up, the FDA had teeth, Food and Drug Administration. These things have been so deregulated, this orgy of deregulation that began in the 1980s. And the PR narrative was concocted to say that these are job-killing regulations. No, in many cases, these are people-killing deregulations. And for that matter, you have to hire people to make sure that you comply. So that's just PR. And so, first of all, big food, which totally has to do with things being allowed in our food that should not. We have 46% of the urban water wells in the United States are filled with those PFAS, those forever chemicals, obviously the toxins in our air. So there needs to be a major shift. You know, when I was growing up, an agent from the Food and Drug Administration could go into a grocery store, and if something was a proven carcinogen, they had power to take those things off the shelves. Now, corporations have so infiltrated, corporations in this case, such as Big Food, have so infiltrated the system that it's like you get the feeling the most they could do is just write, please, sir, to the CEO and ask to please consider. It's really disgusting. And what does this have to do with it? It has to do with that underlying cancer, which is the undue influence of these major corporate entities on all our policies. It's not just food, it's everything. It's why we don't have health care. It's why people are bashing their insulin. It's why foods have carcinogen. It's why farming sector has been so decimated. It's why guns flood our streets. It's why we're ramping up fossil fuel extraction rather than ramping it down. It's why we have been, in our lifetime, fighting wars that were little more than piggy bank activity, by which the military-industrial complex price gouged the Pentagon, and you and me. Okay, thoughts on animal agriculture. We've got to stop with the animal factory farms. And one of the things that's really upsetting to me about the animal factory farms now is that, and this is a big civil rights issue, and it should be very disturbing to everyone. We are starting to see in our country, both in the issue of environmental protests as well as the protests against these animal factory farms and cruelty to animals, they are criminalizing the protest. And you know, protesting is a sacred right here. You probably know about Tortuguita, the young man, the beautiful young man actually, who was murdered by police forces in Georgia, who was a environmental activist, an environmental protest, and he was protesting the building of Cop City, which is very, very disturbing in Atlanta. Very, very disturbing stuff. And they're doing the same thing. And they're bringing RICO charges against some of those people who are trying to protest Stop Cop City. And they're doing similarly nefarious things with people who are protesting animal cruelty. So on animal agriculture, my concern is not only cruelty to animals, and yes, absolutely we must regulate, and yeah, absolutely we need to get rid of these animal factory farms, but also the issue of criminalizing protest in that area. As far as climate change is concerned, I think we should declare a climate emergency and begin immediately a mass mobilization from a dirty economy to a clean economy. The president likes to say that, you know, he's the climate president. I saw that Kamala Harris today tweeted something about their fight of climate change. So this is the deal. There have been healthy green investments in the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's certainly to be celebrated. However, the president has also given more oil drilling permits than even Trump did. And he also approved the Willow Project, which is that $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil extraction project on the North Slopes of Alaska. So what the Biden-Harris administration has done to permit dirty oil, dirty energy, completely nullifies the effect of all the otherwise healthy benefits in of green investment. So when they say that, just please know better. Would you be open to expanding the Supreme Court? This question refers to the fact, of course, that the Supreme Court does not say that it has to only be 9 people. between the Dobbs decision and affirmative action decision, we have a very corporatist court. And you can read a book, there was a book by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, talking about what a strategized plan this was to get these many people on the Supreme Court who just stand for the preeminence of corporate power. What Roosevelt did and what I would do is to make it clear, you guys keep choosing against the safety, health, and well-being of the American people, then I definitely will be open to expanding the court. Now, when Roosevelt said that, they sort of backed off, and you started to see more just decisions coming down. But I think the question is, would you be open? And yeah, I would be open. You listen, you have to stand up for the American people. How would you address the corruption of AIPAC? Well, not so much the corruption as the undue influence, and that's the undue influence of all these lobbying organizations. I mean, it's the same with the NRA and the gun manufacturers. AIPAC used to be a different kind of organization. It used to be whatever the Israeli government at the time was, and it's only been in this, since Netanyahu that it's gone to such an extreme right direction, and now they do represent. What they do is it's like what the NRA does. People who do not go along with what they want, and big oil does it. I mean, they all do it. Defense contractors do it, and this is why our people in Congress are so scared of these organizations. You don't vote the way we want you to vote, and this is what Citizens United allowed. These people are allowed to say, you don't vote the way we want you to vote, we are going to give untold amounts of money to somebody to primary you. And it's not good. But this has to do with the power, once again, we have to be as adamant about overturning Citizens United as some of our fellow citizens were adamant about overturning Roe v. Wade. And ultimately, particularly for those of you who are younger, I want you to have this in mind, because this might take a generation or so. What we ultimately need is public funding for federal campaigns. Going back to that AIPAC thing, there was a decision in the last few years to really become far more proactive in trying to primary candidates who did not go along, and I don't like it. Everybody has a right to not like that. Yeah. I've said so very loudly in certain rooms, I'll tell you. And I know many people in the Jewish community, moderate Jews, people who I have known growing up, and stuff like AIPAC has gone way into that right-wing Netanyahu type direction. People have every right to be upset about it. What are you doing to respond to the Tennessee Democratic Party's exclusion of you from the ballot? Well, we're still waiting to hear from the Secretary of State's office in Tennessee, so that's not a done deal yet. There is concern, though, whether it has to do with Tennessee, whether it has to do with North Carolina, Florida. There does seem to be a pattern here of efforts on the part. You don't know how much of it sometimes is coming from the national office of the DNC and how much of it is coming from the state parties, but there's clearly an effort to shut down some of these primaries and just make it Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden, as though there is no one else. And that is absolutely wrong, and it is absolutely undemocratic. And I hope that you will help me to make it clear that your voice will be heard. And that does mean financial contribution, and it does mean your support as a volunteer. How do you plan to help our economy and reduce inflation? Well, inflation to some extent is cyclical. The bigger problem is not just that inflation happens, but that people cannot absorb it, okay? A lot of that has to do with pure corporate greed, right? Because there's this malevolent strain called often vulture capitalism, crony capitalism. You know, the man who was the primary architect of free market capitalism was a man named Adam Smith. And Adam Smith said it cannot exist outside an ethical context. And this strain of capitalism that so dominates our system today is not ethical. It has no ethical or moral center. It's only about the increase in stockholder and CEO value. And that is at the expense of workers. Their business model is not to create jobs, as some people would like you to believe. It's to eliminate jobs. It's to suppress unions. It's to give tax cuts to the very, very richest among us. It's focused on increasing stockholder value, but at the expense of the other stakeholders, which are the workers, which is the community, which is the environment, and so forth. What would I do? So that's where it comes from, that when these inflationary cycles occur, for the majority of Americans, it can't absorb it. Why? Because 1 in 4 of them live with medical debt, because tens of millions of them have college loan debt, because they have child care costs, because they don't have a guaranteed living wage. So what I have, and all of this, of course, is at Marianne 2024. I hope you will look this up. I hope you will, you're not going to do it all in one sitting because there are a lot of those issues, but I hope you'll go on the issues pages, and one of them that you'll see is the Economic Bill of Rights. In the Economic Bill of Rights, there is universal health care, like in every other advanced democracy, tuition-free college and tech school, like in every other advanced democracy, get rid of those college loan debts, which the president could do with the Higher Education Act, subsidized child care, paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, guaranteed living wage, and guaranteed affordable housing. That's my economic policy. That's the core of the economic policy, and that is what will deal with inflation. How will you beat Donald Trump? I'll beat Donald Trump by offering the American people so much more. Franklin Roosevelt said we would not have to worry about fascism as long as democracy delivered on its promises. As I said, we're not going to beat Donald Trump in 2024 by saying to people, you should be scared, be very scared. Listen, this is how I see it. People who love Donald Trump, and they have the right to love Donald Trump. There are people in this country who you could say to them, he's got 91 more indictments. It won't matter to them. They'll vote for him even if he's in prison. That's not what the danger is for those of us who do not wish to see Donald Trump back in the White House. The danger is of millions of people staying home. And millions of people will stay home. What are you going to offer them with President Biden? Basically, what is his agenda for the next 4 years? Finish the job. What does that even mean to people? They already dropped Bidenomics because they heard me say it or they heard somebody else say it. To say that Bidenomics is to be so celebrated is contrary to the visceral experience of 80% of the American people. So that's how I'm going to beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump tells some big lies. And what our campaign does is it tells some big truths. Truth, it's not enough to just tell the truth. You have to it's got to be like in a court of law when you raise your hand and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I tell the truth about where this stuff came from. The traditional establishment politician only addresses symptoms. They don't want to talk about root causes. Because if you talk about root causes too often, it becomes obvious how often their policies are the root causes. So we get down and we talk about how our entire economic system has swerved from an ethical center over the last few decades. Harming, decimating our middle class, harming people's lives. Once again, you've heard me say a lot of this. People say, in the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a house and could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation. One parent could stay home if they wished, and they could afford to send their kids to college. The middle class has been completely hollowed out now. 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 70% of Americans saying they live with chronic economic anxiety. So we're going to win in 2024 by saying to the American people, I agree that your tax dollars, which is the treasure of the United States, should be supporting things that help you and your family thrive. An economic system should serve the people. The people should not be serving an economic system. And that's how we're going to beat them. Because that's what's going to inspire people to vote, to vote for something better. Vivek and Nikki echoed your sick care system. Did you notice that? Yeah, I did notice that. They say, what is that? The sincerest form of flattery is imitation. Yeah, I hear my lines and my rhetoric and my phrases repeated by the president, by another Democratic opponent. So I guess what I should be complimented. Whatever. Good ideas are good ideas, and it on some level doesn't matter where they came from. Do you have any plan to address the housing crisis? Well, the housing crisis, part of the problem we're dealing with here is private equity buying up whole neighborhoods. We should tax those people up the gazoo so that it's not a good idea. If that doesn't work, we should make it so that only somebody who's going to live in a house gets the first dibs. And also, like I said, in my Economic Bill of Rights, affordable housing is guaranteed. We have housing in this country. What we need the equivalent of a domestic Marshall Plan. We need an economic U-turn. We need to recognize, and I think that that's what my campaign represents, the recognition things have really gone wrong for the majority of people. We now have a government of a few of the people, by a few of the people, for a few of the people, in which policy after policy makes it so that huge corporate interests, wealthiest corporate interests, and wealthiest individuals get to make more money while everybody else is struggling to survive. So the housing crisis is just one symptom, as is 1 in 4 people living with medical debt, as are those college loan debts, as is the carcinogens in our food. These are all symptoms. The root cause is the undue influence of money on our political system, and that's what we need to repudiate. What is your proposal on immigration bans? One more issue where we have to look at root causes. So there are 2 main reasons why people are rushing to the border the way they are. One has to do with the economic destabilization in many of these Latin American countries. And we as a country have to look in the mirror and recognize how much our own foreign policy in the last few decades contributed to that, and also contribute now. 2 things I would do is remove the sanctions on Cuba and remove the sanctions on Venezuela. I think a lot of people don't realize how brutal these sanctions are. The whole point of sanctions is, okay, we're going to put these sanctions on and really hurt the bad guys. And yeah, it's going to hurt the people, but the people who live there will understand that these sanctions were against the bad guys, and then they're going to rise up and get rid of the bad guys. And that's just so not true. I mean, we did all these sanctions against Russian oligarchs at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, and they were like, pfft. Why? Because they have their money in cryptocurrency, because they have their money in banks in Switzerland and castles in Monte Carlo. They're not touched. Who's touched is the average person in these countries who can't get their medicine, their dialysis, feed their children. It's terrible, the brutality and the violence of these things. So how ironic is this? We have sanctions on Cuba, which should be over by now. This is one of the areas where Obama opened it up with Cuba, started to open it up. Trump shut it down, and many of us just assumed that once Trump got back, that Biden got there, that he would reverse much of what Trump had done. And Cuba is one of the places where he didn't. He stayed with Trump policies. Another example, of course, is Julian Assange. Trump had said, Obama had said, I'm not going after Julian Assange, because then I'd have to go after the New York Times and so forth, and it's free speech and so forth, freedom of the press. Trump came down on him, and unfortunately, Biden has not been willing to drop these charges against Julian Assange, and absolutely I would. So where were we? We were talking about, immigration. So we're going to remove those sanctions, because in both Venezuela and in Cuba, people are trying to come here, having, felt the terrible desperation, experience the awful economic despair, in many ways caused by American policy. Now, the second issue there has to do with the violence that people are seeking to escape, that is created by the drug cartels. And it is horrifying violence, I believe that in order to address the root cause here, one of the things we should do is to deregulate drugs in America. We should have an end. We should end the war on drugs. The war on drugs was begun in 1971 by President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon absolutely knew that drugs were not public enemy number one, although that's what he said. And we've spent $1 trillion. So let's look at this. When I was in college, there were 300,000 people incarcerated in the United States. Today, there are over 2.3 million. And 46% of all federal offenders in U.S. prisons are nonviolent drug offenders, the vast majority of whom should be home with their kids. So why don't we, this is what we will do, this is what we will seek to do if I'm president, take away their black market of the drug cartels. I mean, they thrive on the black market created by the U.S. drug war. So we now spend $100 billion a year. We can take a fraction of that and build a world-class network of recovery options. We really need to move the paradigm about drugs. It should not be seen as a criminal issue. It should be seen as a health issue like they do in countries like Portugal. And I don't want a drug czar. I want a recovery czar. So those are two things that are going to address root causes of what's happening at the border. But let's not kid ourselves. There's something else going on there too. 150 years ago, it was keep out the Jews, keep out the Irish, keep out the Polish people. So this is so racist. So much of it is so racist on the part of people like Governor Greg Abbott. I was in Eagle Pass, Texas about a month ago. I saw the horrible situation there at the Rio Grande River, a very dangerous river. 1,500 people drowned trying to get in last year alone. Over 800 this year. I saw the concertina wire. I saw those buoys that would make people drown. A federal judge, fortunately, told Greg Abbott recently that he could not put them back in the water. We could have processing centers right there. But one of the things we're going to absolutely have to do is to deal with these root causes, why so many people are trying to come here. But in the meantime, we have to hold to our own sacred ideals, and that includes asylum. Are there people seeking to take advantage of that system? Of course there are. Are there people that are not good people who would be trying to take advantage? Absolutely. But let's be very clear also, because some of the narrative is so racist and so wrong. The crime rate is much higher among native-born Americans than it is among immigrants. That's number one. Number two, statistically, among the immigrant population, if you help people for 1 year, make it, just get it together within 1 year, the vast majority are self-sufficient. And among the immigrant population, what is true today, which has been true for many years, is that they are overall a great contribution to the U.S. economy, not a suck on the U.S. economy. And do you support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? Absolutely, I support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, along with the release of those hostages and an immediate plan for a two-state solution. There's no other way. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read what other people are saying. Do you still not believe? And then that was gone. Say more. No two-state solution. So when people say no two-state solution, they're saying one-state solution. So if ever there was a setting for a bloody civil war, particularly now, it's a one-state solution. Period. Marianne, this is going so fast. I'm sorry, guys. Do you support Israel? I support the United States. Our highest alliance should be humanity itself. I support equally the security, justice, and human rights of both Israelis and Palestinians. All men are created equal. And that is our North Star. So, yes, I support Israel, and I support the Palestinians equally, and I support the development of a sovereign Palestinian state, as well as the legitimacy of a sovereign Israeli state. What are your thoughts on the prison industrial complex? Well, I'll tell you something. Not only is it wrong, I mean, this is what's wrong in the United States. There are too many profit centers that are predicated on people suffering. That's what the prison industrial complex is. That's what the The college loans are, people were desperate to better their lives. Young people, especially young people of color, are told, get your degree, get your education, you'll close the wage gap. So people are like desperate. And now you have all these people who get their degrees, they come out and they do the math and they go, well, it would take me so many years if I begin in the field that I love and that I got the degree for. I'll be 55, 60 years old before I get out of the college loan debt. So they end up going and working in other fields and think, why did I even get the degree? It's terrible, terrible, terrible. That's why, all that was preying on America's young. And that pisses me off, actually. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Would you campaign in West Virginia? Yeah, West Virginia is important. Can you, 100 years, I'm sorry, this is going so fast. What's your solution? Do I support LGBTQIA+? Absolutely, of course I do. And one of the first things I would do as president is to confer special protection status on transgender Americans, because they are a targeted group right now. It's very terrible, actually. Guys, it's just too fast for me. She's been calling for a ceasefire, absolutely. My thoughts about abortion. I see abortion as a moral issue. I see it as an issue of private morality, not public morality. If you look at the history of the United States in general, what we used to be anyway, and what we are to some extent, on the right side of the political spectrum, you have people more focused on issues of private morality. This is where you get the stuff about homosexuals. Some people have this idea, or abortion or whatever. But traditionally, the left was concerned with issues of public morality. Economic justice, to me, is a moral issue. Invading a country that didn't do anything to you is a moral issue. So for me, I do see abortion as a moral issue, but I see it as an issue of private morality. And I trust the moral decision-making of the American woman, for her to make the moral decision of what is right for her life. And I don't think the government should have any say in it whatsoever. So I would do everything possible to codify. Even that means getting rid of the filibuster, or at least carving out for it, so that we can protect women's reproductive rights. If you see what's happened even since the Dobbs decision in state after state, including red states, where women and men too, I think, have made it clear that they want the protection of the right. And what is already happening is what many of us warned would happen with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And that is horrible situations that women are going through. Really terrible situations, affecting women's health and sometimes their very lives. Israel or Palestine? There's no Israel or Palestine for me. It's Israel and Palestine. I'm not interested in the voices of the haters on either side. And those who glorify the rights of one of those peoples at the expense of the other, these are not the voices that will lead us to a sustainable, just future for either. I know people now, and I have known them before, and I've known them also in that part of the world, who do represent a consciousness of living together. Jews and Muslims were friends for centuries. We're even anthropologically first cousins. And this is a horrible chapter of separation, and I pray that it will end. I do believe it will end someday. And the issue now is, how do we create the space of greatest possibility? And I believe it's a two-state solution. Quit ego and answer questions. Excuse me, what kind of, wow, so many words to say. Yeah, there are a lot of people here who just don't like me. So I get that. I hope you feel that I answered your questions. I answered all of the questions that were sent in to me. And I guess that's it. I hope that you will remember that we need your help on the campaign. I hope that you will go to Marianne. Some of this I can't even read without the glasses and so forth. Go to Marianne2024.com. Please tell your friends, make TikToks, talk to your friends. We are the campaign that is offering a genuine alternative, an alternative to corporatism, an alternative to cutting the cord. We need a new beginning in the United States. We need to cut the cord with an aberrational chapter of American history. We have seen over the last few decades a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%. It's just terrible. It's just terrible. We have an $858 billion defense budget, which, among other things, is the largest global emitter of greenhouse gases. We need to stop the corporate subsidies. We should repeal the 2017 $2 trillion tax cut. Put back in the middle class tax cuts in there because that was good. But repeal those at 83 cents of every dollar that went to the top earners and the top, very top earning corporations. We should stop these corporate subsidies. You know, President Biden today was bragging about, you know, reducing the costs on some of those drugs as though he's like some big champion of the people. No, I'm sorry, sir. We're not going to get all excited about throwing crumbs. This is why I'm running, because there was already a bill in 1980, the Birch Bayh and Bob Dole, the Dole-Bayh Act, that gives the government marching orders. That means marching rights. I mean, they can march in there and lower these drug costs. You know, in any other advanced democracy where they have universal health care, you don't have people who are rationing their insulin. And we have 1.3 million people who are rationing their insulin. It's terrible. It's wrong. So when he, you know, makes it like, oh, he's doing so much, folks, he says, folks, you know, no. And we want to bolster unions, and we want a Department of Peace. We need to learn to wage peace. 4 factors which, when they're present, there will be a higher incidence of peace or lower incidence of violence, and that's expanded economic opportunities for women, expanded educational opportunities for children, reduction of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. When you have that, do I support universal health care? Absolutely. That's what we're talking about here is Medicare for all. However, going back to this waging peace, when you have those things present, you're going to have a higher incidence of peace, a lower incidence of violence, right? And just like they have a military academy, we should also have a peace academy. And we should have an army of peace builders, not only in this country, but around the world. You know, we have 800 military installations in 80 countries. As president, I couldn't just shut down military installations here in this country. Only Congress can do that. But some of these around the world, not all of them, but some of them, absolutely there's no reason for them to exist, and I could unilaterally close them down. They are simply relics of Cold War activity, and of course, keeping up the blob, they call it here in Washington, the defense establishment, what's often called the forever war machine. We do need a military, of course. I look at the military the way I see a surgeon. If you have to have surgery, you want to have the best surgeon. And the United States needs to have the best surgeon on hand all the time. However, a reasonable person tries to avoid surgery if possible. Also, if you look at my whole health plan, the whole health plan, one of the reasons I love it under health is because we don't just talk about treating sickness. We don't just talk about Medicare for all. We also talk about proactively creating a healthier society. We've already talked about food. We've talked about the water. We've talked about the air. Even our economic policies are unhealthy. It's too stressful for people. People who have to work 2 and 3 jobs to make a living, that stress alone contributes to sickness. So once again, public policy should help people thrive. Public policy should, you know, we should not be a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Then we need a Department of Children and Youth. Please remember, we have elementary school students on suicide watch in this country. We have children who are traumatized before preschool. We have in around the country, we have public schools where they have trauma rooms. So you have a very child-centric parent, obviously parent and grandparent, but you have a child-centric president here, someone who believes that if we want a society that's really economically and socially thriving in 20 years, we need to pay far more attention to 10-year-olds today. I want a massive movement of resources into the hands, into the lives of children in their earliest years. We now know that the brain, 90% of brain development is in that first 5 years of life. So one of the things I want to do is I want to convene the best minds in America on early childhood education, brain, nutrition, everything. A lot of that has to start in utero. You know, we have a high infant mortality rate compared to other advanced democracies. What was that? Black mothers and maternal mortality. Somebody was telling me one day how she had one of her children in Maine, and one of her children, I think, was Massachusetts, I'm not sure. Anyway, one of the states, she was talking about what she received after the birth of the child in one of the states. I can't remember if it was the formula, if it was books, if it was diapers, I can't remember. But she talked about what a difference it was between the two states. In one of the states, there's a following up after she had her child, that there was a generosity towards her and her child that was not displayed in the other. I believe the government should help people thrive. And people say anything that helps people at all, they go socialism, socialism, socialism. It's so ridiculous. There is such a thing as righteous profit. You have these hybrid economies, you know, in places like Scandinavia, you have more billionaires there. But there's also the first principle that we should abide by is the idea that the government is the broker between individual liberty, which includes economic liberty, and a concern for the common good. And what's happening in America now is that the concern for the common good, people are just on their own. Way too much suffering, way too much despair. They'll talk about the data, you know. I look at the despair, and I don't care what you tell me your data is. You can skew economic data however you want. If there are hungry children, there should not be one hungry child in America. Too many people are really on the edge in this country. And that's what I would be concerning myself with as President of the United States. So I hope you'll help me get there. Marianne2024.com. We have a lot of work we have to do, and we need a lot of money. So please do what you can. Thank you for being with me. And you do not have my vote. Well, it's a democracy. Biden, you know, you have your right. What's your plan for? Most of these that I'm seeing now, I already covered. You got me 100%. You have my vote. Well, I'm glad I get to end with those because the others were saying, all right, much love. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Follow me on all of our platforms, not only TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Get on the mailing list, please, so you'll get my daily letters, and have a beautiful evening. Much love to you and to yours. Thank you so much.